Hello, I'm going to read this text. Follow along with me, please. Egypt's powerful kings and queens. Before you read, though, reach into your background. What would it be like to have total power over the lives of people? Very few leaders today have such sweeping powers. But at one time, kings and queens had the power of life and death over their people. How would it feel to be responsible for the well-being of thousands of subjects who looked upon you as a god? Some questions to explore. How did Egyptian rulers unify their country? Number two, what were some of the accomplishments of Egypt's greatest pharaohs? Here are some key terms: pharaoh, regent, and dynasty. Key people: Hatshepsut, Menes, and Thutmose III. Now I'm going to read the text. The statue you see here looks like the face of a powerful king of ancient Egypt. And indeed it is. But there's something wrong with this face. You see, there's a woman behind that beard. I'm going to read this little section over here. Hatshepsut declared herself Pharaoh of Egypt in 1503 BC. She ruled with shrewdness and skill until her death. So from the caption back over to the text. The woman is Hatshepsut. Hatshepsut. That's the pronunciation. Who ruled Egypt during the New Kingdom. Hatshepsut was a bold leader who led her army into battle when enemies threatened Egypt's borders. But she is most known for creating a time of great peace and economic success. She encouraged trade with faraway places, sending a famous expedition to the land of Punt on the east coast of Africa. Egyptian traders returned with shiploads of ivory, gold, and spices. Hatshepsut was not the only woman to rule Egypt, but the respected title of pharaoh or king traditionally referred to a man. For this reason, Hatshepsut appears here with the clothing and symbols of a pharaoh, beard and all. Page 68. Citizen heroes. Overcoming obstacles. A man named Nekhbu worked his way up from the bottom of society to become an architect during the Old Kingdom. At first, he carried other builders' tools for them. Eventually, his hard work paid off. The pharaoh made him royal architect. Nekhbu believed in always doing satisfactory work and in never going to bed angry against anybody. So that's a little sidebar about someone who lived in that time. So down here is a caption for this picture. I always find it a good idea to read the sidebars and captions first because they help you visualize and think of what's going on in that time. This plaque from about 3000 BC glorifies events of Menes' reign, is when he was the ruler. At the left of the plaque, Menes looks victoriously on his dead enemies. These must be the dead enemies over here. I'm going to go back up, and this actually shows you the part of the world we're talking about. This was ancient Egypt here, the orange area. I'm going to go back up and read the actual text that goes with this. Egypt's god kings. Hatshepsut was one of many famous Egyptian pharaohs to rule Egypt. Some, like her were wise. Others were careless or cruel. Egypt's fortunes rested on the strength of its pharaohs. Subtitle here. I'm sorry, or subheading here. From dynasty to dynasty. Makes me want to know what the word dynasty means. And it's defined down below here. The history of ancient Egypt is the history of each of its dynasties. A dynasty, this sounds like a definition. A dynasty is a series of rulers from the same family. So, for example, my grandfather was the pharaoh, my father was the pharaoh, now I'm the pharaoh. Egypt had 31 dynasties until it was conquered by the Greek ruler Alexander the Great in 332 BC. Historians group Egypt's dynasties into 3 main time periods, called kingdoms. The earliest time period is called the Old Kingdom. Next came the Middle Kingdom. The latest time period is called the New Kingdom. The timeline on the next page shows the dates of each kingdom. Remember, these kingdoms are not places. They are time periods. The gaps between the kingdoms were times of troubles, wars, invasions, weak rulers. These in-between periods were rare. However, for most of ancient Egyptian history, there was stable, steady rule. According to legend, Egypt's first dynasty began when a king named Menes united Upper and Lower Egypt. So think of the Nile River. He united the upper part of the Nile River and the lower part of the Nile River. He united Upper and Lower Egypt. Menes built a city named Memphis near the present-day city of Cairo. So today there is a city in Egypt called Cairo. Memphis was near there. This is not the Memphis, Tennessee in the United States. This is Memphis, an ancient city in Egypt, in ancient Egypt. From Memphis, he ruled over the 2 lands, Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, which is what the ancient Egyptians called Upper and Lower Egypt. Carvings from Menes' time show the pharaoh wearing 2 crowns, the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. The uniting of Egypt began one of the most stable civilizations in history. It lasted for more than 2,500 years, just to give you some perspective. Our country, the United States, has only existed for 250 years, roughly. Less than 250 years. So I'm going to jump over here to the caption for this timeline. Timeline study. This timeline shows the dates for each kingdom and lists important events and accomplishments of the kingdoms. So here you have the Old Kingdom in red. Builders begin the Great Period, 2600 BC. 2550 BC, statue of the Sphinx built at Giza. So this is the Old Kingdom in red up here, from 2700 BC to about 2200 BC. Then there's the Middle Kingdom here from roughly 2000 BC to 1800 BC. That's the Middle Kingdom in blue. Those are these events here. Egypt expands into the Lower Nubia. Literature and art flourish. Sensuret III strengthens government. And then here's the New Kingdom in purple. 1570 BC to 1085 BC. And these are some of the events that occurred, major events occurring in that time. Queen Hatshepsut rules, the woman we read about on the other page. King Tut rules. Ramses II expands Egyptian territory. So I'm going to move on down here to the next subheading, all-powerful pharaohs. All-powerful. The pharaohs had absolute power over their people. Whatever the pharaoh decided became law. He decided when the fields would be planted. He received crops from the workers on his estates. The pharaoh was also a religious leader. It was the pharaoh, Egyptians believed, who provided his people with the Nile's yearly floods and the harvests that followed. As one official wrote, and here's a quote from an official at that time, "He is the god, Re, whose beams enable us to see. He gives more light to the two lands than the sun's disk. He makes the earth more green than the Nile in flood. He has filled the two lands with strength and life." Make a little connection over here, reading actively. It's important to read actively. One way to do it is marginal notes. Another way. Connect. Make a connection. Compare the role of the Egyptian pharaoh with the role of a typical president of the United States. Well, ask yourself, does the president of the United States, is it thought that the president, the brightness of the president's beaming lights allow all of us to be able to see? No. Does the president of the United States give more light to the states in our country than the actual sun does? No. But they believed this about their pharaoh. He makes the earth more green than the Nile. Well, does our president make spring very green in our country? No. The president has nothing to do with that. He has filled the two lands with strength and life. A president doesn't fill a land or a country with strength or with life. So very different beliefs about leaders. 2,000 years of power. Egypt grew and prospered during its first 6 dynasties, which included the Old Kingdom. It was blessed with able rulers and a well-run system of government. The pharaohs kept the peace and trade with Nubia. With only occasional conflicts, they sent merchants to the eastern coast of the Mediterranean. So that would be the area where Israel is today. But they sent merchants to the eastern coast of the Mediterranean Sea to find timber. This timber, this wood, was used in the building of houses, boats, and furniture. Egyptian merchants may have even traveled north across the Mediterranean Sea in search of trade items. They may have. About 2250 BC, near the end of the Old Kingdom, governors in the provinces began to challenge the power of the pharaoh's government. Egypt's unity, or its togetherness, crumbled, and the dynasties grew weak. On the page, I think 70 now. The Egyptian Empire about 1450 BC, or 1450 BC. Here's a map study. Goes along with this map. Here's your key: Egyptian Empire about the year 1450 BC. So in the north of the Egyptian Empire, way up here, which is now, I think, part of either Turkey or perhaps Syria or Lebanon up here, all the way through what is now Israel, and all the way through what is Egypt today. All of that was their empire. Jerusalem was part of it. Memphis, which was their capital, especially in Lower Egypt. Thebes, the Aswan, there's a dam there, the Aswan Dam. And then here's Nubia down here. So this is the part of the world it's in.